Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rich and Guba, for this invitation on this meeting. Like the previous speaker, I'm also going to talk about our software solutions for whole body dynamic imaging with path-lag analysis. So again, as has been mentioned, SUV probably is not the best that we can do in clinical practice. There are a lot of issues related to SUV in here. I just highlight a few of them: extravasation or synchronization issues with the scanner, the calibrator, or body size calculations. On top of that, you have variations in uptake time. Centers tend to scan at 60, 70, or 80 minutes post-injection, and following therapy, some of the times, patient doesn't go on the scanner exactly at the same time. So that also contributes to the variability of the SUV. And then you have also variations in plasma clearings. So because of that, then there is a move towards going into path-lag analysis, as the previous speaker mentioned. And it was also our goal for some time now to incorporate path-lag analysis into our applications and into our data acquisition software. So we also developed our own solutions, and this is what I would like to show you. Of course, path-lag analysis is not a new thing. It's been actually almost more than 40 years now, but it took some time, obviously, to find its way into clinical software. Obviously, in the past, we used to have only limited field of view. Then arterial input functions obviously cannot really work in clinical practice, and the data used to be quite noisy. Obviously, now moving to scanners with increasing sensitivity, noise is not that much of an issue anymore. And obviously, we can scan multiple beds, or we can have with a total body systems, you can have one basically bed in the field of view. So these sort of kinetic models become more easy to implement in a way into our products. Obviously, path-lag is a relatively easy model and a natural beginning, for example, especially for FTG. So again, obviously you have your path-lag model, and then some time ago, Nicholas Karakatsanis and the group he was working on obviously developed some protocols where you can scan the patient, scan a large blood pool at the beginning of the scan, and then instead of just staying in a single field of view, effectively you can sacrifice some of the temporal resolution of your scan and extend the actual field of view of the scan itself, so you can scan effectively multiple bed positions, using effectively the time that it takes for path-lag equilibrium to be reached to get the early part of the input function. So like I said, we also developed our own software solution for path-lag graphical analysis, and our solution is based on effectively acquiring the data on the scanner and then using a post-processing application on our AW workstation in order to analyze and get your parametric images for KI and volume of distribution. Currently we have implemented our data acquisition for whole body path-lag in our Discovery MI scanner, as well as the new Omni Legend system. And on the Discovery MI, originally we had it on the 30 centimeter configuration, and nowadays we have also implemented into the 25 and 20 centimeter configuration as well, while for the Omni Legend currently is implemented on the 32 centimeter configuration. And obviously, both of these systems, especially on the Discovery MI, the 30 centimeter and the Omni Legend, you have quite good intrinsic sensitivity, which makes analysis more feasible in terms of noise in the data and reducing bias and variance in your kinetic parameters. So like I mentioned before, the original work from Nicholas Kirkachan is still involved basically two different protocols. In the first protocol, which we also have implemented on our system, you inject the patient on the scanner. Our default protocols is 10 minutes for this single bed dynamic acquisition over a large blood pool. It could be the heart, could be the descending aorta, it could be any region in the body effectively. And then obviously you follow up with a number of dynamic passes. And then we have a second protocol in which we omit the first part of the acquisition. So we don't inject the patient on the scanner, we just do a number of whole body dynamic passes, which they can start any time from 20-30 minutes post injection and so on. So effectively it follows the same sort of a similar workflow that most of the departments are used to nowadays with static acquisition, so you don't need to inject the patient on the scan. And then we have included this additional mode on our acquisition software. So effectively you can scan multiple whole body passes without any user interaction, and you can very intuitively prescribe your dynamic acquisition. You can include any number of passes. You can adjust the frame duration per bed and per pass. You can even choose to increase the acquisition per frame, taking into account the decay of the tracer, or increase the amount of time you scan per pass based on a specific time increment, for example. Moving on to the acquisition software, of course, you can load any number of dynamic passes. You can place your region of interest over any large blood pool, depending on the single bed acquisition that you did. So, and for this reason, you're not only limited in a region of interest in the heart. So, for example, you can scan for the first single bed dynamic over another region in the body, so you can include any region of interest for which this first single bed dynamic acquisition you had the data. In case the patient moves, you can also do you can manually adjust the ROI in those frames that the patient moved, so you minimize the effect of patient motion on the input function. You can also do corrections for the red blood cell to plasma partition, and you can fit different models, different exponentials in the input function. We also have included two analysis protocol, the normal path-like analysis, but we also have incorporated the relative path-like analysis based on using protocol number 2, where you don't inject the patient on the scanner. So effectively you end up with a relative KI images. So this is just an example from the application itself, where you can, as I mentioned before, you can draw any number of regions of interest, and you can visualize your input function on the console, and you can select whichever input function you would like to use for proceeding with the analysis. And again, you have also the option to adjust the ROI on the frames where the patient effectively moved, so you can sort of minimize the effects of motion on the input function. And then, like I mentioned before, you have different options to fit a sum of exponentials to the tails of the input function. You have different parameters to adjust the limits of those exponentials. Also, you have the option to adjust the parameters for the red blood cell to plasma correction, or if you want to do, or you can omit it altogether. And so you have these options in order to get your image deriving input function as accurate as possible. So this is just an example of let's say the full acquisition protocol. So you get your number of dynamic frames over the single bed position, and then also you use the corresponding field of view from the whole body dynamic passes to extract the input function, and together with the passes you end up with your KI and volume distribution, and lastly with the metabolic rate of FTG. And similarly for the protocol number 2, as we call it, where you don't have the early part of the input function, you just repeat the steps with the part of the input function that you do have available. So just again comparing those two, as I mentioned, we for protocol number 2, where you inject the patient away from the scanner and you just put him on the scanner to acquire a number of passes, we analyze the data with relative path lag, and with relative path lag, obviously you're missing the early part of the input function. But nevertheless, the KI image actually ends up to be proportional to the original KI, or the absolute KI, should you have the complete input function, and the KI that you end up having with the relative path lag, it ends up to be globally scaled compared to the absolute sort of, or to the original path lag. That obviously doesn't stand the same for Fourier distribution, but at the same time, KI is effectively the image of interest here. And then, of course, you do have the options, all the normal options, where you can save your images, you can export them, you can segment them, so you can use all the tools effectively that we have available on our AW workstation. Right. So moving on quickly into some images from our clinical experience. So as you can see, this is an example of a normal patient. As I showed you before, you get your early single bed dynamic acquisition, and together with your passes, you end up with your SUV, your metabolic rate of FTG, and your volume distribution image. You can really nicely see that the volume distribution image looks more like an angiogram, very clear definition of the blood pool effectively. And of course, like the previous speaker mentioned, the liveries also shows up because of the blood pool and the unmetabolized FTG there. Another patient, this is the patient with a thyroid isthmus, thyroid lesion in the lesion in the thyroid isthmus. And then we reconstructed the data with OSIM and also our regularized reconstruction. You can see also the effect of image reconstruction on the parametric image there. Similar to the previous speaker, we also are working together with our collaborators at Zurich University Hospital. We also saw that one of the things that we saw early on with the parametric images is that we can actually spot potentially false positives. In this case, similar to the previous speaker, was FTG pooling due to clotting, due to thrombosis, which you can actually see it on the SUV on the blue frame, on the zoomed blue frame, but you don't really see it on the metabolic rate image, even though you see it on the volume distribution image. And again, if you actually see on in this particular example, you don't really need to see the parametric images. You can just see on the dynamic images themselves, and you can see all the FTG that is basically in the blood pool effectively. Like I mentioned before, using let's say the truncated protocol, where you don't put the patient on the scanner and inject, we use relative path lag. And in this, again, in this particular sort of analysis pipeline, as I mentioned before, the KI images are relatively scaled. But for certain applications where you don't really care about absolute quantification, you just care about the qualitative assessment of your parametric image, your parametric image will end up being exactly almost identical to the absolute KI sort of scenario. So in this example, we do have a patient with echinococcosis in the liver, and you can see the effect of using a reducing number of dynamic frames in order to get your relative KI image effectively. And again, with echinococcosis, again, we just published a case study of a patient where we analyzed the data with normal path lag and with relative path lag, and then you can see also the as you would expect, the improved contrast in the liver that you get with both absolute and relative path lag compared to the SUV image itself. And I'm just gonna finish my presentation. Moving on from the clinical tools, we also have some offline reconstruction tools that we have developed for further research and for investigating things that are not included in our clinical tools. So we have developed a graphical user interface for our offline kinetic modeling application, which is again specifically designed for padlock graphical analysis. And there are a number of options for the different researchers to investigate. So you can obviously you can analyze separate static images or full body dynamic images, and you can basically navigate into the different tabs that you have on the application. You can you can tune your different parameters. You have different options for denoising. You have different options for the input function, whether you want to manually segment it or automatically segment it. You can use population input functions. You can do relative, of course, padlock analysis or absolute padlock analysis. Generate your static SUV image from a weighted average of your dynamic frames, and all the things pretty much you can do also on the clinical application. And so with that slide, I would like to close and just mention a few of the lessons and challenges that we still have. Obviously, from a manufacturer's perspective, when we're developing our tools, we find it quite challenging to find the right balance between workflow, robustness of the tools, obviously because they're for clinical use, automation, which is also another important thing, but also give the users flexibility in order to vary different parameters, especially in this early phase where we still try to understand the clinical use. Obviously, a challenging thing is that clinicians are not used to reading parametric images, so we need a bit more time. We need to perhaps let them some time to understand the value and compare parametric images side by side with the SUV images and try to get a bit more understanding themselves. Obviously, including more images takes more time out of their readout time. So this is another thing that perhaps is limiting usability. Obviously, even with population input functions or relative padlock analysis or other techniques, scans still take a long time. So obviously with the long field of view systems, acquisition will get shorter. But as dynamic acquisitions get shorter, so as the static, so we always have to compete against the static acquisitions and try to see the added value that the dynamic images bring to the patients. Obviously with short acquisitions, this will drive also the volumes of dynamic acquisitions up, so we'll be able to explore more indications. We also think that
could you finish up, please, Fotis? I'm sorry, we're really behind time.
Yes. Yeah, just to close that, even though we do have the tools now for the clinic, at the end of the day, it's the clinical impact and the health economics which will actually drive the expansion of our kinetic modeling tools in our product solutions. Thank you very much.